Rawr! Hey, so I am here to discuss. Many YouTubers have talked about this before about parts of Sesame Street that scared them. Really, it hasn't been until the advent of the internet that that scary Sesame Street was even so much as a well-known idea at all. Because it used to be Sesame Street, so supposed to be the opposite of scary. Now, as I've said before, I am a avid old school Sesame Street fan. I love the show from the 70s and the 80s, all the way up to May 1990 when Jim Henson tragically died. So, I feel that when he died, the show died with him. But whereas he went to heaven, the show went to hell. And I will say that in the 80s, when I was little, I watched the show. This is something that kind of sucks because I watched the show, but I found some of the parts of it, after watching it for a while, some of the skits I found really scary. And I've never liked surprises, scary surprises sneaking up on me. And with Sesame Street, that's kind of what you get because you never know what skit is coming next. So rather than risk trauma, I just decided to avoid watching the show altogether after a few segments scared me in the 80s. This, however, worked to my grave disadvantage because by the time I started watching it again, it was just barely before Jim Henson had died, and then shortly thereafter he died, so the rest of the show that I watched, I thought it was crappy quality. And as scary as the old school Sesame Street skits could be for me, I found that some of the same skits and also other skits with the new school show scared me even more, and I think that the reason they did is because I feel like the show, after he died, went down vastly in quality. So, I never watch any episode made after Jim Henson's death anymore. However, I love to watch old school Sesame Street. I have the 3 DVD sets, and I have episodes that from iTunes that I've bought, and I watch the show on YouTube of the old episodes. So I love it. That said, I wanted to just share with you my top 10 scary Sesame Street skits, the skits that scared me. Number 10. Oh, I wanted to tell you before I start, currently with my YouTube channel, it's pretty new, so it will be a while before I can add music, animation, graphics, or show any other videos that aren't mine. That stuff will come eventually, but you all will have to be kind of patient. So, my top 10 scary Sesame Street skits. Number 10, Marty the Chair. Now, this wasn't one of them that was in the 80s when I was a little kid, and this is a claymation skit that shows this creepy-looking black chair called Marty walking around, a chair walking around with a creepy face in this room and making sort of creepy voices. He's kind of a creepy voice, and it turns out he's a nearsighted chair who needs his glasses. So he puts on his glasses and then walks out of the room. Now, the reason I found this scary is because I thought that the animation, Marty the chair himself, the black chair walking around like on chair legs, his face, his voice were all very creepy, and I still kind of do now. Number 9, Geometry of Circles, aka Kaleidoscope. I now finally know what Kaleidoscope the hell is, which it is an avant-garde piece of art by Philip Glass, who I now know is an awesome artist. Sometime I got to see some of his movies, such as Koyaanisqatsi and Animals in Love, and Einstein on the Beach and all the others. So those are on my movie bucket list. However, as a 2-year-old, sitting in what was often a dark room where when you're 2, everything is much larger. You're like a midget compared to everything when you're a child, and it's how you see the world compared to how an adult sees it. So I really did not know what the fuck Kaleidoscope was as a little kid. No little kid would. So because I remember like sitting in the dark room and the huge TV in my face, and then suddenly there'd be the dark background, and I'd see the weird-looking, creepy colors in the circle, and hear the dissonant organ music and harpsichord, whatever it is, and those voices chanting like ethereal voices in a church, but in a minor sting chord. Well, might not have been so scared if, as a 2-year-old, I would have known what the hell that was, because it turns out that Philip Glass is a very liberal, hippie type who cares a lot about the earth and is very, species equal, gender equal, race equal. He's all about, just the whole acceptance thing that I do, that I believe in. So, yeah, I think he's awesome now, but now that I know what it is, and now that I know who he is and his intention of his work, I love Kaleidoscope. I love the geometry of circle skits. But I wish my 2-year-old self had known that. So, number 8, the Yip Yip Martians. Those guys, I still find them scary, although now as an adult, none of these skits scare me like they did before. So the Yip Yip Martians, I've had the creepy off-staring eye thing that they have is one big part of it. I have always been kind of creeped out by puppet or cartoon characters or plush toys or people even with creepy off-staring eyes, because it's just like some people say the eyes are the windows of the soul, and I think for any animal with eyes that's kind of true. But just looking into somebody's eyes, if the eyes look creepy, especially if their voice and face and just like general expression is just kind of off, that's always scared me. So that's partly why the Yip Yip scare me, because in addition to the creepy off-staring eyes, they have those big creepy mouths, the shivering movements, the sparkly sort of like shiny tentacle bodies, and their voice, which you don't even know what they're saying. Their voices, along with that, just scary as hell. I wondered, a lot whether or not the Jim Henson and the other puppet people who were doing the Yip Yip Martians and the other puppets ever took acid. I later found out that Jim Henson did take acid once, and it did nothing for him, allegedly. So, even then, they creep me out still somewhat today. So, anyway, number 7. Now get ready for this, because this might disappoint a lot of people, and if they ever got rid of this, there would be a huge uproar. Cookie Monster. I think he's cool now, but for a while, again, his eyes are kind of googly, and it's the creepy off-staring eye thing again that got me. So, plus I often thought that his voice was creepy. Although now I'm not really scared of the voice, because I realize that it's not I used to think it was like sort of an otherworldly, creepy, eerie voice, but I later found out that it's more like my own roar. It's sort of like a leonine roar voice. So now I think it's cool. So, yeah, Cookie Monster doesn't scare me anymore, but as much as people say Sesame Street has been sanitized now, for all those kids who still find Cookie Monster and his off-staring eyes creepy, tough luck for you kids, because that won't be for a long time, if at all, that Sesame Workshop would take Cookie Monster out of the show to sanitize it completely, because he's one of the show's main characters, and way too many fans would complain. Although maybe they would, now that they got rid of most of the human characters from the, today's episodes, if they want to get rid of Cookie just to get rid of all fear in kids. They have the power to, since they already got rid of most of the human cast. So, let's see. Okay. Number 6, the Monster Disco. They had a couple scenes, like the ABC Disco with Grover doing his John Travolta impression, and In and Out Fever, that, had like the monsters, including the ones with like fangs and angry dark eyebrows that pointed downwards, and horns, although I think horns are cool. But I always, as a kid, I often thought that there was a little something, different between the horns and fangs of the Muppets and those of real animals. However, now I don't really think there's much of a difference, because they're just like stylized fantasy creatures. So I don't really think it was that scared me. But what scared me was the combination of the angry eyebrows. It might have been the eye thing again. So the Muppets were dancing with the angry eyebrows, and what the kind of lighting that they had for those disco scenes is just like this dark red. It almost reminded me of the fires of hell, where and the thing, disco music, I love it, and I might not have been so creeped out by it as a kid, if especially during all the monster disco scenes, it was always played in minor key. The ones where it wasn't played in minor key, I don't remember seeing, because You Lost Me Cooking at the Disco was played in a major key, as was the scene with where the two-headed monster, spells out the word dance, and then the monsters come out on the disco floor. However, the ones I remember seeing were In and Out Fever and Grover at the Disco, and for some reason Sesame Street had to play them in a minor key. However, I think that those disco scenes are really cool now because for the same reason I found the Funky Chimes theme kind of ending theme kind of creepy as a kid. I guess disco, if it was played in a minor key, kind of creeped me out as a kid because as a 2-year-old I really didn't know what disco was. But when I was older, I got into 70s music a lot, and now I'm a huge disco fan. So, yeah, so I love those scenes now. So, I already mentioned number 5, which is the Funky Chimes funding credits. That, creeped me out because it's a disco funk beat, but it's in a minor key, and it kind of emphasizes the minor key. But now that I'm an adult and I'm a disco and funk fan, I love it. So, okay, number 4. Let me try to think of this. If there's anything like that. Let's see. Those might have just been. Oh, yeah, number 4. Honk Around the Clock featuring the Honkers. I honestly really don't know why this skit scared me so much, but that was the first skit that I seen that traumatized me to the point of eventually refusing to watch the show at all. So, in that scene, it's a spoof of a Bill Haley and the Comets' 50s rock song, Rock Around the Clock. But the whole, sequence of that skit is really bright, and it was probably overstimulating for me because as a slightly autistic kid, the visual and the audio of that were really, really in your face. Because you have the honkers who look kind of creepy. They don't really look like they're of this world. They have horns for not horns, but they have like trumpet musical instrument horns for ears, and big noses that they honk on, and they don't even talk. They just honk on their noses, and their eyes are kind of creepy, off staring as well. So I know they featured that song in the Sesame Street home video release, Count It Higher, and for some reason I find this a little creepy. They mentioned like the made up records that each of the songs were from, and for some reason they said that Honker on the Clock was from Ooga Records. Ooga, that with honkers, that kind of sounds like, druggy, like LSD or something. But, I really didn't know why they made up that sort of acidy type of word for honkers, but just the fact that they made that up, kind of creepy. When the honkers are honking, some of them, like, move around, like, in sort of like a drug trippy way that I find it seems like that. And, like sometimes they get moved around without, even walking themselves, and they have the little baby honker who's a little, creepy along with the adults, and they have not just one but like 3 disco balls in the skit, and if you look closely, it looks like they're using the same prop set in Honk Around the Clock that they're using for the monster disco scene. It's just like with Honk Around the Clock, they have 3 disco balls, and I think one on the ceiling, another in like one on each side of the building, and it's just the lighting is really bright, and that a huge clock that something about the clock that was all bright with the huge hands, and then the like prop scene with it that looks surprisingly similar to the prop inside Monster Disco, except I think it might have been the same prop that they used, because with Monster Disco, instead of the bright lights and the 3 disco balls and the clock, it was very similar looking room prop set, but with that hellish dark red disco lights. So, and they had the disco ball, but it was in the darker red lights. So, and then the very last part of the song of Honk Around the Clock, the honkers break the clock, they smash it down, they carry it into another room, and they smash it off screen. And it was something about the smashing of the clock that I found kind of creepy too. That part I don't really remember why that scared me the most. But it might have been as I saw one YouTube comment that commenter said about it that it made him or her feel like the whole room was going to crash down, or the whole his whole TV or house are going to crash down. Maybe that scared me, but I don't remember. So, but the honkers in the previous scene are kind of scary. They don't scare me not right now, but I can see why they did as a kid. So, number 3. Let me see if there were any other parts of the show that really scared me. Those were the main parts that did. So, maybe, so number 3, 2, 1, I don't know if any of them. Let me try to think. Yeah. I really don't think that any, other parts of the show creeped me out as a kid. So, well, there was one from like the 90s after Jim Henson had passed away, which, it's like candles being reverse melted, which, these, rather than melting down, they had them quickly, reform from being melted, to this creepy, music for like, and each candle was like, an uppercase letter and a lowercase of the same letter. So that's number 3. And then number 2, Hairy Monster at first with his big, thick eyebrows, angry eyebrows, scared me. Most of the Muppets, like, some of the Muppets like Harry and Frazzle, who had like, really dark, angry, bushy eyebrows. Again, it's not just if eyes are creepy and off-staring, but if eyes look exceedingly angry. That kind of scares me. I've always responded powerfully to eyes and to the expression within any creature's eyes, and it can be a lot of feeling, love for them or feeling fear. So, I guess it was thinking with the eyes, I'd say, and number 1, the last thing that kind of creeped me out, was Frazzle, because in addition to those angry eyes, he had the huge fangs and, the sort of devil red fur, and he kind of made those creepy sounds. So, I will say one thing that, this was just my 4-year-old imagination acting out when I was 4 years old. I remember, sitting at home with my mom, and every time my mom or my dad or my babysitters or anybody, was going to go to PBS to, and might see Sesame Street, I just, yelled at them to not, because I did not want to relive the trauma of these skits anymore. But, I remember when I was 4 years old and I was at the kitchen table with my parents, and, they were switching through the channels, and I begged them not to switch to PBS. I didn't want to risk seeing Sesame Street, but they did, and they kept the TV on with the remote in there's hand for a while and told me, there's nothing to be afraid of. Don't worry, don't be so afraid. At that moment, I remember seeing on the TV screen, it was basically within this creepy scene where the fires of hell were burning, this evil, really scary music played, not Honk Around the Clock, but actual evil, scary, music with, the giant clock and a honker with like a beater for the clock, staring with those creepy eyes, at me. And the honker's fur was a hellish red, along with the fires of hell, the creepy music, and that clock with his creepy eyes looking at me. I know this is kind of creepy, but I just have to tell you. And what's also creepy is I remember seeing the same thing one time, but with the TV twice as big as it was in real life. I wondered for a while, was that a freak hallucination? And I later found out that it's a fact of psychology that sometimes little children their imaginations can make them see things and hear things that aren't there. So I wasn't crazy. That's just what little kids sometimes experience. So, for all you YouTubers who found Sesame Street scary, I really hope this video doesn't give you nightmares, but I hope that with this we can kind of share some commonality and realize that, even though we might have felt like wimps for being afraid of the ultimate show that's not scary, that's kid-friendly, it did definitely have a dark side, as Cybercat of the Film Den mentioned, and we don't have to be alone in realizing that all of us were sometimes scared of it. So, see you guys later.